All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for logging in to today's webinar. My name is Adam Bleibtreu, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Creative Circle, and I'll be the moderator for today's conversation. We put this conversation together really to help answer some questions that I had, which I'm sure that as a group we all have, about how to manage stress in today's new and ever-changing world. Before we get started, I wanted the opportunity to go through a few ground rules with you. As I mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Creative Circle. A little information about who we are and what we do. We've turned off the chat functionality, so please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your window to ask us questions as we go through the conversation today. We will try to get to as many of them as we can. Also, please be aware that we're recording today's conversation and we will have it posted to a landing so that you can download it or review it at your leisure. It will probably take us through the weekend to get that done, but you will all receive an email with instructions on how to find the landing page and log on and have access to this conversation today. The next thing I wanted to mention is there are a few slides you'll see today that have some reference information. I will encourage you, if you want, to take a screen grab of, but again, it will be part of the presentation that's posted as the webinar on the website, so don't feel pressure to have to write them down or grab information from them today. We'll in fact have them available for your review when the webinar is posted. So let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. We have an amazing panel today, and we're going to go through a little bit of a presentation for both of them, and then we're going to have a question and answer session with them, and I'm going to come back and again repurpose some resources for you to review today. Please note that we put this panel together with mental health professionals, and that the opinions that they're going to represent are their own. They do not necessarily represent the opinion of Creative Circle, and we do certainly hope that you find their opinions helpful and valuable. Let me introduce the two panelists quickly, and then we'll get started. We have with us today Dr. Carrie Hastings. She'll talk a little bit about her background in a moment. She's a clinical and sports psychologist who works with the LA Rams, amongst others. And Dr. Alan Pack, who is a psychiatrist in Los Angeles with a specialty in anxiety disorders. With that said, Dr. Hastings, I really want to welcome you to today's conversation and let you get started.
Thank you, Adam. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here with you virtually. It seems like everything today is virtual, but that doesn't mean we can't get some valuable information. So a little bit more about myself. As Adam said, I am a licensed clinical and sports psychologist and the team psychologist for the Los Angeles Rams. I grew up in Pennsylvania and then went to college at the University of Notre Dame. I was on the track team there as a sprinter and hurdler, and I really think that was kind of the birthplace of my interest in sports psychology and fueled a passion for it. So I ended up getting my master's and doctoral degrees at Pepperdine University, where I've also served as a member of the adjunct faculty and worked in the Student Counseling Center. And I obtained a graduate certificate specifically in sports psychology. I am a certified mental performance consultant with the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, and I'm listed on the Sports Psychology and Mental Training Registry with the United States Olympic Committee. And I really believe that so many sports psychology tenets are applicable to different genres, especially as team leaders and managing groups of people and in the business world. So hopefully you will gain some valuable information today. So with that, we will go on to talking about dealing with stress and anxiety. And you know, the first step in dealing with stress is you have to be able to identify it. So how does that feel in your body? And it's different for everybody. What kinds of things do you say to yourself when you are stressed or anxious? And how does it manifest? You know, some people withdraw, some people get irritable. So being able to just stop and identify and name that is the first step. And then you want to be able to master some relaxation strategies. And they all start with the breath. And it sounds very simplistic because we're all breathing all the time. However, there actually is a right and wrong way to breathe when you are trying to relax. So you want to lower your breath down into your abdomen, right behind your belly button, to where when you take a deep breath, your chest and your shoulders aren't raising, but actually your belly button is going forward if you put your hand on it, and you might even feel your lower back expand. If you can master that, then you can start applying all sorts of other techniques, such as incorporating deep muscle relaxation, positive self-talk, even some visualization that can help you relax and de-stress. Mindfulness is a key element of centering, and whether it's now or even when everybody's back at work. And that basically is just helping yourself stay in the present. It's so easy to think far ahead into the future or dwell on the past, and those are some of the biggest contributors to stress. So if you can just redirect your focus into the present and use as many senses as you can to be mindful. So, what will help you center is if you tap into your surroundings or what's happening right now with as many senses as apply. And infusing every day with gratitude and maintaining a sense of humor, that goes a long way. Connect, and I say if it makes sense, because, there's been such encouragement during this time to stay connected with others and reach out. But, that's not for everybody. Some people are kind of more introverts, and that can almost feel like pressure that can then increase stress. So if it makes sense to you and feels right to reach out to others and connect, then do it. But if it doesn't, then you find other ways of de-stressing on your own, and in terms of, whether it's hobbies or mindfulness exercises or, relaxation techniques. Next slide, Julie. Maintaining focus. This can be very difficult in a time like this. I find it happening with myself. I see it with my children right now, and trying to do this whole homeschooling thing, and they're kind of over it, and why do I have to do this, and how can you stay focused when you're in your home surroundings, which you're used to using as a sanctuary or just chilling out. So maintaining a routine is probably one of the most important things in being able to maintain focus. So that includes trying to wake up about the same time every day, going to bed around the same time, making sure you're getting enough sleep. That is that is a huge component that I think is often underestimated. That contributes to performance, is that sleep factor and how it impacts your sharpness in terms of brain functioning. Setting goals for yourself. You want to set not just long-term goals, but mini goals for the week, goals for each day, maybe even goals for that hour. And you want your goals, you may have heard the term SMART goals. So you want your goals to be specific. You want them to be manageable and achievable and realistic and timely. So you might give yourself a deadline. And, we do this a lot in sports in terms of, well, yeah, you want to win the Super Bowl, but how are you going to get there? So you got to back it up into very small increments. Well, what do I need to do today to help me achieve that long-term goal? And then visualization to center, as I mentioned, and to gain clarity. How do you see yourself? What does success look like? And then, and that goes into the next bullet, solution-focused mindset. So if you see yourself 5 years from now, or even 1 year from now, well, back that up and work backwards in terms of your thinking and planning. And then you'll get to a spot of, well, where do I start? Because that can be the hardest thing to do. Next slide. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes. I'm sure many of you are tuned into The Last Dance, which has been nothing short of addictive. But, Michael Jordan in this said so eloquently, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So you have to fail to succeed, and you have to take risks. If you don't take chances, you can't have those big victories. So that's also how you build resilience, and you need resilience in any walk of life. So, maybe even developing a mantra for yourself that hits home, that you can refer to as part of your centering and maintaining focus. When you start to feel overwhelmed, go back to a mantra that rings true for you, and that can fuel that motivation again. Okay.
Dr. Hastings, thank you so much. I know that you've got a few resources here. Any that you want to point out for the team? And remember, you can take a screenshot now, or you will have access to this information when you get a link to re-register for it.
So the books, I'll just speak a little bit to, these are books that I really love. They're very timely, and Mindset has been around for a bit. And that really is such a great book in terms of focusing and developing a growth mindset. And Carol Dweck is really an expert in that field. That applies to, again, so many things, whether it's sports or other professions. And then Atomic Habits is more recent, and Stealing Fire. These they don't read like a textbook. And Atomic Habits is kind of about the best way of developing healthy habits, good habits, and breaking the ones that aren't facilitating your growth. And then Stealing Fire is really about this mental state of ecstasis and how it can be achieved. And again, it applies to sports, the military, and the business world. So when it comes to managing teams and trying to fuel an adaptive mindset that really contributes to performance, these are just some great references. And then there's just some links in terms of that you can use for relaxation, or some apps that you can download. They're not for everybody, but you see what works, and the rest you throw out.
That's great. Dr. Hastings, thank you so much. Dr. Pack, just for a moment before we get started, I want to remind the audience that we're recording this, that you will receive an email early next week with a link back to the recording, and the recording will include the references and the materials presented here. So don't feel stressed or anxious about trying to record these references or resources as they're presented. And once you get the link back to where this webinar is stored, you'll be able to share that with your friends and your professional relationships. So it's accessible to anyone that has access to that link. So just wanted to make sure you guys knew that. Dr. Pack, it's really a pleasure to have you here. And if you could give us a little of your history and background, and then we'll get started with your presentation.
Thank you, Adam. Well, let's see. I'm a psychiatrist, like it says. I trained at Ohio State and UCLA. At UCLA, I did psychophysiologic research and a residency. And at UCLA, I continue to be on the faculty, teaching and supervising psychiatric residents. Along with that, I've had a number of other experiences in the professional world, but chiefly I practice psychiatry. I have a private practice. We're here to talk about stress, and in particular, stress during COVID-19. I think the best place to start is, what is stress? There's a fellow named Hans Selye, was a fellow, he's long dead now, who defined stress about 100 years ago, a Canadian physiologist and endocrinologist. Selye identified stress as originating with threat, any kind of threat, be it physical or psychological. The threat stimulates the adrenal glands. He was an endocrinologist, so he was a big gland guy. It stimulates the adrenal glands, and when you stimulate the adrenal glands, they pump out adrenaline and cortisol. He called them stress hormones. Stress hormones fuel the flight or fight reaction. Flight or fight, I hear it's fight or flight, but that reaction. What does that mean? Well, I think it's self-explanatory, and that is that once we get adrenaline and cortisol pumping, we feel like fighting or running away. a natural thing if you're an animal or even a human being in the wild. Not so natural if you're a 21st century person, in particular in a team and a job and a family and all those kinds of things. So next slide. Thank you. What can you do? Well, you can fight, I suppose. And if you're holed up at home with your family, that's not unusual, but generally speaking, not productive. You can run away. Well, maybe not these days because we're not allowed to go outside. So that thing's kind of off the table too. Let me see here. Now there's one thing that's missing, but there's a third option, and that is you can kind of stew in your own juices. That means the hormones. So you can sit there and be suffused with adrenaline and cortisol and that kind of stuff, and see if you can't last out. Well, that doesn't really work out too well, because the longer that you stew in your own juices, you end up getting more and more anxious. The adrenaline makes you anxious. Longer still, you start to get depressed. Cortisol and then cortisol depletion creates depression. And finally, the combination of overactive adrenaline and reduced cortisol produces actual physical illness of a variety of sorts. The most common ones cited are cardiovascular diseases, but not the only ones that occur. What do you do about this? Next slide, please. You can try not to get stressed out, but like I was saying, it's a biological reaction. It means nobody is exempt. Nobody. We all get stressed out. There are plenty of people who pretend like they don't get stressed out. I saw an interview with a guy named Lou Holtz, a football coach, a few years back, and the interviewer said, "So Coach Holtz, you look like you're really stressed out." He had just been fired from Notre Dame, I think. And Holtz turned around and looked at him with a look that would kill and said, "I don't get stressed out, I make other people get stressed out." Well, yeah, not really. Otherwise, he wouldn't have blown up like that. But that's what makes a football coach. Anyway, other things to do besides, pretending like you're not stressed out. Healthy living. So what do? What can help? Exercise can help. It can burn off that adrenaline. Meditation, like Carrie was talking about, can help. I have a particular preference for one type of meditation called transcendental meditation, which is kind of the easiest one in my book. But meditation can help too. The way the meditation helps is it helps you deconstruct the panic. That isn't the saber-toothed tiger. In fact, it's simply an unhappy customer. We tend to overblow the amount of threats. But the most important thing I can talk about here is going to work. What do? When we go to work, it helps counteract those feelings of helplessness, isolation, and shame that normally come with anxiety. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's not just you who gets ashamed for being anxious. It is everybody who gets ashamed for being anxious. We feel like it's somehow inappropriate, even though it's a normal biological function. But in any case, going to work helps counteract it. At work, we should be focusing as much as possible on near-term goals. There's a song in Frozen, I don't know if any of you know of it. It's called "Do the Next Right Thing." What that's about is it's about focusing on a short-term, a near-term goal that you can accomplish, as opposed to thinking about, I don't know, working on world peace, which while it's valuable, isn't going to happen anytime soon. And God knows it's not going to help you be less anxious. So it's really important at work to be focusing on near-term goals. The other thing at work is we've got the social contact. We're not alone. There's strength in numbers. And by the way, all of us are anxious, frightened about COVID. And if we're not frightened about COVID, nevertheless, we're getting frightened about, no, depressed about staying inside, that kind of bunker mentality that people get that generates even more anxiety. So that's what I got to say, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you very much, Adam.
Dr. Peck, really, really helpful. Thank you. As you guys may have noticed, we have some help behind the scenes in both Julie and Catherine. So thank you both for helping run this panel with us. As part of the registration process, we asked you if you had questions that we could talk about today. And so let's get straight to some of those. We've tried to bucket them into certain themes or topics. So Dr. Hastings, if you don't mind, the first group of questions I want to talk about is really how to manage a team that's suffering from stress, or otherwise phrased, a stressed out team. So Gary had asked us the question, how proactive should we be in terms of checking in on our staff's mental health? Should we wait for them to come to us, or should we reach out?
Great question, Gary. And I think you used the word that I would respond with is proactive. It is best to be proactive and assume everybody is stressed, because whether they are at that moment or not, or on that day, as Alan was saying, everyone will feel stressed at some point, whether it's about the job or not. And so better to arm your staff with some resources. So always have resources and put them out there right off the bat. Make sure they're accessible. That can be in the form of a referral list of local therapists. There's national hotlines that people can call 24/7. Definitely include a suicide hotline. You may not know, and it's probably likely you wouldn't know, if someone is thinking of killing themselves. And the kind of the golden rule with that is to name it. You're not going to put the idea in someone's head. But I can see where if you are someone's superior, that would just be awkward to kind of just ask someone. So just having that resource there, so if anybody needs it. And then, one thing that we do with the RAMs is I give periodic staff trainings to where the training staff or coaching staff can learn about how to recognize red flags. And, our training staff interacts with the players a lot, as do the coaches, and it's easy to get caught up with their roles and either miss some of the signs of extreme stress or signs of anxiety or depression. Or even if they see them, well, then what do we do about that? That's out of our realm. So that's one thing you can do. You can have a professional come in and give a training periodically or annually for your team. And then one thing actually that we are initiating this year, Coach McVeigh had wanted to develop some leadership within the team. And so we thought we would have kind of a smaller group of leaders, because my idea was to also have some peer support and some players that other players could go to if they wanted to just bounce something off of them or vent, and know that it's okay, that they've already volunteered to be that resource for them. And there's a lot to be said for that, because, for example, in the dynamic I'm in, I can be very well trained in what I do. However, I've never played professional football. And even if I did, I've never been on this team with these dynamics, with these coaches. And the same could be said for your teams. That's a very unique set of circumstances. And sometimes only a peer can really understand what it's like. So maybe appointing a person or two or a group of people to serve as a peer resource within the group. So definitely being proactive in some of those ways.
Really helpful, Dr. Hastings. Thank you. I really like the idea of having peers sort of looking out for and paying attention to each other. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And again, there'll be some resources and references at the end of this conversation. Dr. Pack, we have Ariella and Leanne asked two versions of the same question, which is about compassionate team management. How do leaders show compassion for their team while at the same time working to keep themselves sane?
Good questions, again. And to a large degree, also, they were addressed by Carrie just a second ago. But I'll take a slightly different angle on that case. Don't forget what Carrie said. I had, in fact, a patient come to me on Zoom not too long ago at a session. And we started out, and he said to me, "How frightened are you?" And I thought, I said back to him, "That's my question." And he said, "Yes, but." And I said, "I'm frightened. You know, this is something that concerns me. I want to stay safe. I want my family to be safe. I want my patients to be safe." The reason I'm telling the story is that I think that that's a good entree to working with your team, the team that you're managing. I'm really frightened. How frightened are you? In other words, to see if you can't take away the reluctance to talk about an emotion that for most of us feels, you know, natural, but also a little bit embarrassing and maybe not admissible in polite society. So that as a leader, if you can go in saying, this is how I feel, how do you feel? It will normalize it. Having said that, no manager wants to be in the position of being a psychotherapist for their team, at least not actively. They probably feel like they are much of the time, but you know that's not what you guys get paid for. You get paid for managing. So what you do at that point, having normalized it, having given somebody you know, a couple of minutes to get it off their chest, and for them to know that you know, and for you to know that they know, then you can say, okay, let's get to work. It's the next step. Having said that, you know, obviously there's some people who are going to be far more conflicted by their anxiety and or too conflicted to actually work effectively. And in that case, you know, you're back to the solutions that Carrie was talking about that I really like, having, you know, doing some training for the managers, but also providing resources for the employees. The managers are going to get stressed out mostly because they're trying to do more than what their job is, in my experience. Well, not only COVID, but that's going to make everybody more sensitive and more fragile. As a result of that, when you get really anxious there, when you try to do more than what you can do, for instance, being a psychotherapist, somebody's best friend and whatever, it's taking the job a little bit too far, doing stuff that you don't quite know how to do. And I would not extend oneself further than, I'm frightened, how are you? A few minutes, and then done.
Great. Thank you. Insightful. I know that we are a couple of minutes over our allocated half hour. I think the panelists are going to be happy to continue this conversation for a bit longer. So for those folks out there in the audience that want to stay with us a bit longer, we're gonna run over, but I think it's some important information. Dr. Hastings, we had a question for Sarah come through about how this pandemic or stress from this pandemic could trigger other traumas, attachment issues, anxiety, and do you have one or two tips for sort of coping skills?
Yes, and that is absolutely true. And that certainly can contribute to added stress and anxiety. And, you know, if there are pre-existing conditions such as depression, this can just amplify it, this situation. And, you know, there has been talk about this time period expecting a rise in domestic violence, in the suicide rate, but also there might be a baby boom. So, you know, it's such a unique time. And just be reassured that you're not without resources despite feeling isolated. Many people are doing teletherapy right now, and most, if not all, the clinicians that I know are offering it. And it's just like this. No, it's not the same as being in person, but it's something, and at least we'll give you a bridge until we can all be in person again. You know, you want to create space for yourself and make sure you're keeping up with self-care. And, you know, from meeting your basic needs, making sure you're eating 3 meals a day and getting the proper sleep, also to, you know, fueling your mindset and your mood. So doing things that make you happy. If you need to, you know, take a break or go for a walk, there is evidence that shows, you know, Dr. Pack mentioned physical activity can decrease symptoms of anxiety and depression, but also just immersing yourself in nature and using that mindfulness to really soak it in. So nature can be helpful. And then, you know, tap into some of the hobbies you never have time for. One of the biggest things is humor. Maintain a sense of humor. You know, that can help alleviate some of the amplified stress and anxiety. And then just really being compassionate with yourself, you know, and that's having empathy for yourself and just reminding yourself, you know, kind of the way you might tell your best friend or your child things to comfort them. Like, yeah, you know, this stinks. Like, this time is really hard, but I'm going to get through it. And it may not always be pretty, but one way or another, I'm going to get through it. So giving yourself that reassurance in terms of self-talk can be helpful.
Really helpful. Thank you. The unfortunate part for me is that my hobby is cooking. So I seem to be spending too much time eating. There are much tougher problems to have. Dr. Pack, Lisa asked us a question, which I think is a really interesting and important one. She's seeing emotional outbursts within her work circle, which would appear to be really sort of generated by stress. Is there one thing that you would offer a manager who's dealing with a team that has team members having emotional outbursts? Just like one thought.
Yeah, it's a good question. I hadn't thought about that in this context, but you know, emotional outbursts, the first thing you do with that is to approach the person with a little understanding and see if you can't get them to chill. But she's not asking that question if it's that easy to solve. So for somebody who's really having a tough time, number one is to get a time out for them. I'm assuming that this is going to be some version of teleconferencing where the outburst might occur. But I would do the same thing in an office as well. I would make sure to isolate that person from the rest of the staff. As it turns out, outbursts of that sort usually are the equivalent of a panic attack. And panic, unfortunately, is contagious. It can quickly spread to everybody else in the near vicinity, even if it's on television, on a video thing. So first things first, to maintain the team, the rest of the group, isolate the person from the rest of the team, not from everybody, but from the rest of the team, and then spend some time with the person. Know that that outburst is not anger 99% of the time, even though it's often or maybe almost always presented as anger. It's anxiety, it's panic. I'm losing control. I don't know what to do. I just could scream, okay? important to remember that it's, that it's an anxiety issue, it's a panic issue. And anything you can do at that point in time to calm the person down, but in particular to, do a one-on-one with them is important. With little children, what we do is we papoose them. You know that expression, the papoose board? We take, the old Indian thing is to put a child on a board thoughtfully and to wrap them up tightly, and it helps them calm down. There are various versions of that for adults. Mostly it's to put them in a quiet room with one other person to keep them safe, and they calm down. It's not of any use, in particular if the person is looking or talking angry. It's not useful at all to attempt to counteract the anger, to argue with the anger that extends it.
Well, thank you. I like the comment that it may present itself as anger, but it's really founded in anxiety and anxiousness, and in some cases fear. Having that realization as you're watching an outburst come, I think is an incredibly helpful tool. Thank you. Dr. Hastings, moving down the list a little bit, I know that you're a mother of 3 and that you have a household that you run as well as a practice. And we've got a few questions around techniques to manage stress and work-life balance, knowing that it's all existing in the same 500 square feet or more.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear everybody who's feeling that right now. I have 3 boys, 11, 8, and 4. So I'm in the thick of it. And I know a lot of you are too. I must say, on average, 3 to 5 times every day, we cannot go to the ER today. So it's a circus most of the time. So I can certainly empathize, and people ask me all the time, even outside of quarantine, how do you manage this work-life balance? And most of the time my response is, I don't know that I am. and just kind of keeping it real. And truthfully, some days I am and some days I'm not. And that's just reality. And I try to make that okay. I mean, I will be the first to admit, most of the time my house is a mess. And, but I kind of tell myself, well, you know what, if I want to, most of the time I don't have time for everything. So if I'm going to make the choice between when I get home, spending time with my kids or straightening the house, well, I'm going to go with my kids, and, my house won't be messy forever, but maybe right now while they're young, if something has to go, that's it. I will say, the kids are feeling it too. And you may be witnessing a lot more meltdowns or frustration. As Dr. Pack was saying, same with adults, it's when you see anger or irritability or outbursts, that is often the manifestation of something deeper. So it may be just a deeper anxiety or fear or sadness. And just meeting them where they are and empathizing with that and joining them in that, rather than trying to solve it. It can't all be solved right now. And sometimes that can almost make a person feel more helpless, rather than, at least if you can join them there and empathize and narrate what they're going through, then at least they don't feel completely alone with it. So sometimes, I will even use a narrative technique, to where if you develop a story, either for yourself or for someone else, in terms of, this is where I am in that story, and then what's going to happen next. Okay, well, right now I feel like I'm losing it, but this is what happens next in my story, and this is how I get to this point where I feel a little bit together again. But it's tricky, I don't know if any of you have watched Jim Gaffigan, the stand-up comic, but there's a piece of his act that I love where he's talking about, I think my kids are mocking me. There's trash and it's like 4 feet from the trash can, and I think they're playing with me. And I feel like that a lot of the time too, where I'm like, help me, help you. So so it's tricky, but really just being honest with yourself and with your families.
Really helpful. Really helpful. I know quite a few of the people that I work with have children at home and working spouses and partners. And it always feels like there's a lot of stress and uncertainty in these times. Dr. Pack, I had a question come in. We had a question come in that goes back a little bit to the conversation about the outburst. And this is, if you have a teammate that you're trying to manage who is consistently negative and through that negativity is disruptive, would the same process you described of intentionally isolating them for a one-on-one and understanding what's behind the negativity, is that the right path?
Yes.
Great.
Let me go further. The deal there is people are getting depressed, and it's that kind of person can be genuinely depressed, and obviously you have to be concerned about that on some level. That type of person can also simply be a complainer. Excuse me, that's a derisive term, but can be anxious and looking for a way to blow off the anxiety. In either case, again, it's better to do a one-on-one. Anxiety and the stuff that flows out of anxiety is contagious. I'll keep on saying that. If you have a lot of people sitting around talking about what's wrong with the world is going to go to hell, more and more rapidly with that. So it doesn't really get you anyplace. One-on-one, what's going on? And I would bet you a nickel that if somebody sat down with that person in a quiet environment, things would cool off considerably, although it wouldn't be surprising to me in a psychiatric setting to see the person become actually very depressed, very sad, and that was the expression of that all along.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So we've run over, and I think we've got one last question that I'd sort of like both of yours opinion on. So we're deep into the sheltering at home, the anxiety and stress that it's producing, but we're seeing some states and some cities talk about reopening. And we've had a couple of questions come in about what suggestions, and I'll start with you, Dr. Hastings, what suggestions would you have around managing the anticipatory response to, oh my gosh, now I have to go into an office and go back to work?
Yeah, and that worry is completely valid. I mean, it's we've never experienced anything like this. So kind of being filled with anxiety about what that's going to be like can be overwhelming. And my advice to that would be to, first of all, exercise all those things we're talking about, relaxation and mindfulness and gratitude. But whenever you feel really overwhelmed, the best thing to do is slow it down. Just slow everything down and break your thoughts or your tasks, your goals into mini increments. It may be unrealistic to expect anyone to just go back to work and jump back in and pick up exactly where they left off with all of those tasks or balls that they were juggling. So be patient with yourself, with your teams. Take it slow and as much as that's possible. And, really, and try to apply some of that self-talk and self-compassion. Everyone's going to feel it. Everyone, whether you work or not, there's going to be a felt difference. And hopefully it will be gradual. There's even, I don't know if you've heard talk that dogs are predicted to suffer separation anxiety once their owners go back to work and aren't at home as much. So everyone will have to cope a bit, but yeah, really just setting some goals. Your goals may have shifted from when you left, just in terms of getting back on track. And some of those may be purely mental goals. So slow down.
Really, really helpful. I really like the advice about small steps, staying focused on small goals, one after the other, and slowing the world down. I think utilizing that sort of as a mantra that the more anxious I get, the more anxious my team gets. I just want to slow things down. Dr. Pack, thoughts on how to get that going back to work anxiousness or anxiety managed a little bit?
Well, I think it's been covered pretty well already. The slow steps are, I think, really important. Near-term goals. Think about that. But I'll give you a personal example again. A few weeks ago, a week ago, I had somebody come into the office, a patient come into the office for the first time. I had seen a patient in person in 2 weeks or 3 weeks because I've been doing everything remotely. The person had to come in for psychological reasons that I'm not going to go into. But the thing that was kind of surprising to me was when I saw them, when I let them into my consulting room, I had a miniature panic myself. It was like, oh my God, here's a live, warm human being. Are they going to get me sick? That was one of the first thoughts I had. After that came, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do my job. I haven't done it in this framework for close to a month or whatever it was. And a few other things come to mind. I'm not going to go into them. But the thing that I did was exactly what you were talking about, what Carrie was talking about. Slowed myself down and thought to myself, who is this person? What is the problem? How do I solve the problem now? And that, just the idea of organizing my goals in my head, reduced my anxiety. It really was not like nervousness. It was more like a little miniature panic. My panic went away, and then I was able to engage in the work at hand. So,
really, really helpful and insightful. Thank you. I can visualize that process of feeling the anxiety and the panic rising, and then finding, in your case, the solution, which was, again, small goals. I know what I'm doing. I know how to do it. This is my goal, and we're going to achieve this single goal. Really helpful. Dr. Pack, Dr. Hastings, I cannot thank you enough for coming to the webinar today and to the discussion. I know that we've had a significant number of people listen to us today, and I'm sure I speak for them when I express my appreciation. As I've said, we are going to record this, post it. All the registrants will get an email that'll take you to not only this webinar edited down slightly and recorded, but it will also have these references and resource materials, as well as some others that we'll put up. You can expect that email to come your way early next week. I'd like to thank again, Dr. Pack, Dr. Hastings, your insight, your advice, your guidance, really, really helpful. I'd also like to thank Julie and Catherine for your help behind the scenes in making sure today was as successful as it is. So these are the two slides you've seen earlier. This is another one that we'll have up there with additional resources. There's quite a bit of material that could be helpful if you go to the Creative Circle website and you look for the blog in the top navigation. It will take you to some insightful articles. So thank you all so much. Please shelter safely and stay well. And we look forward to getting back together. We'll be doing another topic in 2 weeks. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.